Cherie Steinmetz, and we're at Lateral Roots Farm in Wapato, Washington. We were lucky enough to be raised on a hop farm and grew up doing so many things in agriculture that has taught us so many lessons, and really kind of the bones of what agriculture is built on: hard work and commitment to your crop and seeing it through. And so we represent the 5th generation of farmers here in the Yakima Valley in our family. We purchased this farm in 2018, and since then we've come across some major diseases that have affected the soft fruit industry. We've come across legislative bills that could possibly change agriculture drastically, what it looks like for us. We've come across the pandemic and what that looks like, managing people that work for you in a job that's essential during a pandemic. So there's been some real challenges, but you don't ever get to just take a time out. You just have to keep moving forward. So,
and I think a big part of that is seeing that growing up, like seeing, Dad doesn't have sick days. Dad was never homesick. Like, he had to show up for work. And sometimes he was one of the only people on the farm working, and he definitely had to show up for work, because if he didn't, nothing was going to get done, and I guess I can't speak for everybody else in the world, but I don't know how much you get to see that in other industries. If your parent wakes up and doesn't feel well and stays home, you don't see how that could impact other people at the office, or how their job plays out, where when you're on the farm, you see that directly. It's just not an option. The water has to be changed, and there's a spray schedule. Frost control has to happen. Harvest has to happen. It just and so you get to see that firsthand, that there's no option. You should show up every day.
My dad had come to all of us siblings and talked to us and said, "Hey, there's an opportunity coming up to purchase a farm. Are you guys interested?" And really, without any hesitation, by all 4 of us siblings, we said absolutely. We didn't really even know what farm he was talking about at first, honestly. We just said yes. And so, but what that meant to purchase a farm in 2018 that has, homes and cold storage and acreage of a variety of fruit, it meant having to talk to banks. It meant having to talk to people that we looked up to for advice. And how do we even go about doing this? How do we put together a budget? How do we put together, how do we know what our expenses are going to look like? How do we even, come up with these numbers? And so really reaching out to a lot of people that we grew up around that have been in ag their whole life, and tapping into those resources, which is very humbling too, when you're a young 30-year-old that thinks they have it all figured out and carving your way in the world, and you really have to humble yourself and really kind of look at others for advice and for leadership and for financial support, which is a tough thing to do. But we did that, and
all the while thinking that you have to prove that you actually can do all the things that we're saying we can do.
Exactly.
Like, it's not just a piece of paper. Like, it's gonna play out in front of all these people.
Yeah.
You have to actually be able to follow through.
Saying that what you're gonna make is what you're gonna actually make. Yeah. And so that process was actually pretty fast and furious, because the former employer was ready to retire. He wanted to be done, and this was his last crop he wanted to raise. And so we had to work pretty fast and diligently on this process. But we all worked together and figured out some family orientation as well in that, and when you're bringing 4 siblings together that have their own families and children, there's things to be talked about, and there's process you have to put in place to make sure everyone's happy and taken care of and agrees, if X happens, if Y happens, what are we going to do? How do we handle that?
We did purchase this farm as a very well-known, established entity. Like, part of the purchasing process was us speaking to the buyers because they had such a huge attachment to the relationship continuing the way it has been. The farm that we purchased is predominantly peaches, and Pence Peaches is just the name of the farm, but on the west side it's like a proprietary, the same kind of peach, and everybody wants that peach because the Pences put so much into growing and producing the top quality fruit that they could to get out there to consumers. And we didn't really even realize that because Pence Peaches wasn't really sold in the Yakima Valley. And so it wasn't something we were aware of growing up until we started seeing, like hashtag Pence Peaches on Instagram and realizing how big of a deal it was. And then to see that we get to then be part of that and connect ourselves to something that's, what was third generation was birth? I think third generation in his family. And so that's probably been the coolest part, is that we get to connect to a legacy rather than just build our own.